You know the ultimate fairy tale. I mean, we all do.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the story of this nation globally worshipped for having, like, the perfect welfare system. A society where the safety net is woven so tightly that literally no one ever hits the concrete.
Right. Near zero unemployment. Everyone is completely taken care of.
Exactly. You've heard this story. You probably believed it. I know I did.
It's basically the ultimate utopian vision of government intervention. We're talking about Sweden in the early 1990s.
Yeah, the absolute gold standard. But today, we're going to look at what actually happens when that utopia collides with, human reality.
And human nature.
Right, because in 1994, a huge crisis hit. That perfect illusion just broke. And what spilled out of the cracks challenges literally everything you think you know about social safety nets.
It really does. What's so fascinating here is the sheer scale of the illusion. The entire world looked at Sweden and saw a miracle, right? They saw a blueprint.
A model for everyone else to copy.
Exactly. But the data reveals something completely different. It reveals a system that was quietly, almost accidentally, engineering its own collapse.
So we are doing a deep dive today into a landmark piece of research. It's a paper by Barbara Sianesi, a researcher from the Institute for Fiscal Studies.
Brilliant research.
Incredible work. And our mission today is to just tear away that golden veil of the 1990s Swedish welfare model. We're going to look at cold, hard, inescapable administrative data.
No surveys, no guessing, just the math.
Right, we're going to expose the fatal flaw hiding inside a system that was honestly built with the best of intentions.
But before we jump in, we really need to establish some ground rules, because this raises a super important question about bias, and we need to be crystal clear with you.
Yeah, we are not taking a left-wing stance today. We are not taking a right-wing stance.
We are not here to preach about the ethics of welfare or, the morality of taxation. That's not what this is.
Leave your politics at the door. We are acting strictly as neutral data detectives. We're just reporting what the numbers from this unprecedented historical event reveal about system design.
Because when you build a machine, you have to look at how human beings actually operate it.
And the answers here are going to be really uncomfortable. Because the data proves that massive government intervention and high welfare didn't just fail to cure unemployment. In some very specific ways, it might have quietly destroyed the actual will to work.
Yeah, it's a massive slap in the face to conventional wisdom.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's go back to Sweden before the crash. Just give me the landscape, because if we're going to understand the fall, we have to understand the height they fell from. Before 1990, Swedish unemployment was, what was it?
It was almost invisible, literally under 3%.
Under 3%. That is a microscopic number.
Yeah.
I mean, in the modern industrial world, economists practically consider 3% to be full employment.
Right. It basically means anyone who actually wants a job has one.
It's an incredible achievement.
It was. The Swedish active labor market programs, they called them ALLMPs, they were supposed to be the international gold standard. The idea was super simple. If someone loses their job, the government steps in immediately.
They don't just leave you hanging.
Exactly. They don't just hand you a check and say good luck. They give you a classroom. They retrain you. They teach you to weld or code or manage logistics. They actively manage the labor force.
Which sounds incredibly proactive. You aren't just letting people rot at home on the couch. You're constantly upgrading the workforce.
That was the dream. But then the early 90s global recession hit, and by 1994, that beautiful 3% unemployment rate, it just vanished.
Devon.
It skyrocketed to a massive 13.5%.
Oh, wow. That is an economic earthquake. Going from 3 to 13.5% in just a few years isn't a dip. That's a systemic shock.
Exactly. Suddenly, hundreds of thousands of people are out of work. So what did the Swedish government do?
I imagine they just threw money at the problem.
They opened the floodgates, they doubled down on those active labor market programs, they built more classrooms, they hired more instructors, and they just funneled the unemployed into these training centers. They spent an absolute fortune.
Okay, but how much of a fortune are we talking about here?
So by 1997, 4.5% of the entire Swedish workforce wasn't working in the traditional economy. They were sitting in government training programs.
Almost 5% of the country is just in a classroom.
Right. And the cost of running this massive apparatus, it consumed over 3% of the entire gross national product.
Wait, over 3% of the GNP?
Yeah.
Just to put that in perspective for a second. Most modern nations really struggle to spend 2% of their GDP on their entire military defense. Sweden was spending 3% just on training classes for unemployed people.
It was a massive financial hemorrhage, and here is the truly terrifying part of all this. For a very long time, the government had absolutely no idea if it was actually yielding any economic return.
That's insane. That's like a corporation taking its entire R&D budget, paying it out as a special dividend to shareholders, and just hoping it somehow invents a new product on its own. They were burning money blind.
They totally assumed it worked. I mean, they looked at the classrooms, they saw people sitting at desks, they saw instructors lecturing, and they just thought, well, we're fixing the problem.
But they weren't.
No. Imagine a country spending an astronomical fortune only to accidentally fund a permanent state-sponsored paid vacation.
Okay, a paid vacation. You have to explain that.
Yeah.
Because nobody goes to a government welding class and calls it a vacation. Where is the flaw here? How did a noble system meant to teach people new skills accidentally turn into a cheat code for infinite money?
It all comes down to the actual mechanics of the Swedish safety net, the fatal loophole. Let's just break it down purely through logic. Let's look at the rules of the game.
Okay, I love this. Let's play the game. Walk me through it. It's 1994. I live in Stockholm. I work at a factory, and I just got laid off. What happens to me on day one?
Day one, you go to the employment office. You apply for unemployment insurance. And the Swedish system is incredibly generous. It pays 80% of your previous salary.
80%. That is huge.
It's massive.
I mean, if I was making $50,000 a year, I am now making $40,000 just to stay home. I don't have to commute. I don't have to buy work clothes. My actual take-home lifestyle barely changes at all.
And it gets better. That 80% compensation isn't just for a few months. It lasts for up to 60 weeks.
Over a year.
Yeah.
I can sit at home, maintaining my lifestyle on the government's dime for 60 weeks. I mean, honestly, if you offer me that, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to sleep in. I'm going to fix up the house. The pressure to find a job tomorrow is completely gone.
Which is exactly the point of a safety net, right? It prevents panic. But 60 weeks eventually runs out. You hit week 58, week 59. The cliff is approaching. The money is about to stop.
So panic sets in. I need a job right now.
Or you need an alternative. And this is where the Swedish government introduced their labor market programs, the training courses. The government basically says, hey, your benefits are running out. Why don't you enroll in this 5-month skill building class?
Okay, so I take the 5-month class, I learn a new skill, and hopefully I get a job. That still sounds perfectly reasonable.
It does, until you read the fine print. And here is the fatal flaw, the loophole that literally broke the country. Under Swedish law at the time, if you sat in a government training program for 5 months, the system legally classified you as employed.
Wait.
You heard me. For the purposes of the welfare registry, sitting in a classroom for 5 months counted as having a job.
Let me process this.
Yeah.
You are telling me if I sit in the classroom for 5 months, just listening to lectures, I am legally classified by the state as an employed worker.
Yes.
But if I am employed for 5 months, does that mean...
Yes, it does. It means you automatically reactivate a brand new 60 weeks of 80% paid welfare.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
That is literally an infinite money glitch. It is a perfectly legal, state-sanctioned backdoor to never working a real job again in your entire life.
You never have to touch the real economy.
I take 60 weeks of paid time off. I spend 5 months sitting in the back of a classroom, doodling in a notebook. Boom, the clock resets. I get another 60 weeks of paid time off.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the ultimate psychological trap. When the rules of the game so heavily reward stagnation, rational people will stop playing the game of work.
I can't even be mad at the citizens. I mean, if you hand someone a golden ticket, you cannot act shocked when they cash it. It's just human rationality. But surely the government noticed this. Didn't anyone look at the books and say, hey, we are bleeding billions of dollars to people who are just looping through the system?
Well, they didn't see it because they were looking at the wrong numbers. For years, the Swedish government bragged to the international community that these programs were a massive success. They published reports showing high employment rates among the people who took the training.
How is that possible? Were they just lying to everyone?
They weren't lying intentionally. Their math was just fundamentally flawed. If you use standard Western economic math to judge this welfare program, every single conclusion you draw is an illusion.
Okay, let's tear up the rule book here. How did normal, highly educated economists measure this program? Why were they so blind?
Normal evaluations are simple. It's a standard A/B test. You compare a group of people who took the program to a group of people who never took it. You track them for a few years and you look at who has a job.
Right, that sounds like basic science. You have a treatment group and a control group.
It sounds logical, but in the context of the Swedish system, it's a totally rigged game because the training programs were open to everyone. Anyone who stayed unemployed long enough would eventually get offered a program, and most would take it to avoid falling off that welfare cliff.
So if everyone eventually takes it, who makes up the never took it control group?
The overachievers. Think about it. Who is the person who loses their job, goes to the unemployment office, and never once needs to take a government retraining class?
Oh, it's the rock star.
Yeah.
It's the highly motivated, highly skilled worker who gets fired on a Friday, spends the weekend networking, and gets a new job by Tuesday. They never take the program because they're never in the system long enough to need it.
Precisely. The only people who never took the program were the people who found jobs immediately on their own.
So the government was comparing people who were chronically unemployed and desperate enough to take a government class to absolute rock stars who were incredibly employable from day one.
Yes. In statistics, this creates a massive future outcomes bias.
That is insane. That is literally like testing a new experimental diet pill by comparing people who actually took the pill for a whole year against people who quit the trial on day one because they were already professional fitness models.
That's exactly it.
Look, the control group has six-pack abs. The pill must be terrible. I mean, of course the fitness models look better. It tells you absolutely nothing about the medicine.
That is a perfect analogy. You are comparing two fundamentally different populations. The rock stars were always going to get jobs. The people in the program were always going to struggle. By comparing them to each other, the government statistics were entirely useless. They were measuring pre-existing talent, not the effect of the classroom.
So the math is broken. The system is bleeding cash.
Enter Barbara Sianesi. How did she fix this? If the A/B test is broken, how do you actually measure if this multi-billion-dollar program is working?
Sianesi basically led a data science revolution. She threw out the standard control group entirely. She said, we do not compare you to someone who never joined. We compare you to someone who hasn't joined yet.
Wait, explain that. How do you compare someone to a version of someone else who just hasn't hit the button yet?
It requires a massive shift in perspective. Sianesi used a method that allowed her to freeze time. Let's look at a twin scenario. I love this. No academic jargon. Pure logic. Walk me through the twins.
Imagine two identical workers, worker A and worker B. They are the same age, they have the same education, they live in the same city, and they both lost their jobs on the exact same day in 1994.
Okay. Two identical profiles entering the machine at the exact same time.
They both searched for work for 3 months. Nothing. The market is tough. Month 4 hits.
Desperation starts to creep in. The rejection letters are piling up.
Exactly. In month 4, worker A panics. He sees a government training program for logistics, and he signs up. He leaves the open job market and goes into a classroom. Worker B, his exact twin, makes a different choice. Worker B decides to hold out. He decides to keep hunting for a real job in open unemployment for at least 1 more month.
So Sianesi compares worker A to worker B. She freezes time at month 4. The guy who jumps into the classroom in month 4 versus the guy who stays on the pavement in month 4.
Yes. It isolates the exact moment of choice. Both of them are equally desperate. Both of them have been unemployed for the exact same amount of time. The only difference is the choice they make today. Does joining the program right now help your future more than staying in the job market right now?
That is brilliant. It completely strips away the bias. You aren't comparing a chronically unemployed guy to a rock star. You are comparing a 4-month unemployed guy to another 4-month unemployed guy.
And she didn't just do this for a few people. To make this math work, you need an overwhelming amount of data. You need a massive, inescapable microscope on human behavior.
The sandbox. How many people did she track?
116,130 human beings.
Wow.
Every single person who became unemployed for the first time in Sweden in 1994. She tracked them day by day, month by month for 5 straight years until the end of 1999.
116,000 people over 5 years. That isn't a sample size. That is practically an entire census of the unemployed.
And it was purely administrative data. Administrative data cannot lie. There are no surveys here. Nobody is self-reporting their feelings.
The database knows all.
It knows exactly what they did. It knows every single class they registered for. It knows every single welfare check they cashed. It knows every single day they spent legally looking for work.
So we aren't guessing anymore.
Huh.
We aren't relying on government PR. We have the absolute truth locked in a database. So what did the truth reveal? When Sianesi ran this massive twin experiment, what actually happened?
It revealed an amazing, incredibly frustrating paradox.
Okay, here we go. The paradox. Let's look at the raw numbers. When the data finally printed out, did the training programs work?
On the surface, yes. Over the course of 5 years, taking a training program actually boosted your long-term employment rate by 4.8%.
Okay, wait. I need to make sure I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
You take the class, you are 4.8% more likely to have a job 5 years later. That means the training actually made people more employable. People learned skills. They used those skills to get jobs. That sounds like a total victory. Why is this a paradox? Why did people stay in the welfare system even longer?
Because you have to flip the coin. Yes, the long-term employment rate went up slightly, but taking a program massively increased the total amount of time people spent soaking up unemployment benefits, and it massively increased their likelihood of jumping into yet another training program down the road.
How can both be true? How can you be more likely to get a job, but also more likely to suck up welfare?
Because they got locked in. Let's look at the immediate aftermath of making the choice. Let's look at the first 3 months after worker A signs up for the program.
The lock-in effect.
Exactly. Signing up for a job training program actively destroys your immediate chances of getting a job.
Actively destroys. That is a really harsh way to phrase it. How does getting trained destroy your chances?
In the first 3 months of a program, a participant's chances of getting a real job drop by a sharp 3.9% compared to their twin who stayed on the pavement.
Why? Is the training so bad that employers are literally repulsed by it?
No, it's purely psychological and logistical. Think about what it means to take a full-time training class. You are trapped in a classroom 8 hours a day. You are drained of energy. When you get home, you don't want to polish your resume. You aren't checking the job boards. You certainly aren't going to midday interviews. You just stop looking.
You take yourself completely off the market.
Exactly. Over 50% of the participants in these programs are effectively stuck. They are unable or unwilling to escape the project to take a fast-moving job offer. They become completely invisible to employers.
Okay, I can see that. It's an investment period. You put your head down, you do the work, you take yourself off the market for a few months. But eventually the program ends. The average class is, what, 5 months long?
Roughly 5 to 6 months, yeah.
So let's look at month 6. The class ends, you graduate, you have your shiny new certificate, you know how to operate a forklift, or you know how to do bookkeeping. The lock-in effect is over. I would expect a total stampede to the job center. Everyone rushing out to use their new skills.
You would expect that. A rational, growth-oriented system would expect that. Instead, there is a stampede to the welfare office.
Unbelievable.
Around month 6, right after the program wraps up, the welfare collection rates don't drop. They explode. They shoot up by a staggering 12.4%.
12.4%. So they didn't use the certificate to get a job. They used the certificate to march right back into the welfare office and renew their benefits.
Exactly. The training program wasn't a launching pad into the economy. It was just a toll booth on the highway to more welfare. You pay your toll, 5 months of boredom in a classroom, and the gate opens for another 60 weeks of paid time off.
It is the infinite money glitch in action. We are literally seeing it in the data. They endure the class just to reach the paycheck.
Now let's zoom out. Let's look at the final ledger. We tracked 116,000 people. We watched them for 5 years. We spent billions upon billions of Swedish krona building these schools, paying these instructors, and funding this massive apparatus. What is the grand total return on investment?
Give me the final number. Let's hear it.
After half a decade, the Grand National Rescue Plan bought a microscopic 5.6% net bump in long-term employment.
5.6%. That is nothing. For a 3% drain on the entire gross national product, that is a rounding error.
It is a tragedy because it didn't cure the disease of welfare dependency. It just managed the symptoms. It took hundreds of thousands of unemployed people and hid them inside classrooms so they didn't show up on the official jobless statistics. It made the politicians look good while the people slowly atrophied.
Okay, you just mentioned hiding people. Let's talk about those statistics, because this is where the story pivots from, like a tragedy of bad design into a full-blown data scandal. I want to talk about the ghost workers.
This is definitely the darkest, most fascinating part of the data.
Sweden bragged to the world. They said, look at our control groups, look at the people not in programs, our unemployment rate is going down. But Sianesi's data reveals those people didn't actually find jobs, they just vanished. How do you lose a human being in a modern government database? I mean, Sweden isn't a developing nation. They have impeccable records.
It happens way easier than you think. A citizen is registered as unemployed. As part of the rules, they're supposed to show up for an appointment at the employment office every few weeks, just to prove they are actively looking for work.
Right. Standard accountability stuff.
Right. But one day, they don't show up, they miss a phone call, the government sends a letter, no response. After a certain period, the system's automated rules just kick in. It crosses them off the official registry. They are coded as contact ended, or, in statistical terms, simply lost.
So because they missed an appointment, they're no longer counted as unemployed.
Exactly. They are gone from the numerator. And here's the trick. Joining a training program lowered this ghosting rate by 5.4%.
Wait, let me process that. If I take a government training program, I am 5.4% less likely to vanish from the system. Which means,
The people who didn't take the program were vanishing?
yes, the people who stayed in open unemployment were vanishing at a very high rate.
Yeah, the control group was just evaporating. The government looked at the people not in programs, saw them disappearing from the unemployment registry, and assumed, oh, they must have found jobs. Look how high the employment rate is for the control group. They don't even need our help.
But they didn't know they had jobs. They were just ghosts. The government was literally counting missing persons as a success metric.
Exactly. And when you add the ghosts back into the machine, the whole Swedish welfare miracle just crumbles into dust.
So who were these ghosts really? Did Sianesi figure it out? Did they just move to the woods?
Investigators eventually tracked a sample of them down, and what they found was an entirely separate economy. They found that about 50% of these vanished people were actually working secret, off-the-books jobs, the black market.
Of course they were. They were double dipping. Or they were just hiding from the taxman. You collect welfare as long as you can, and when the government gets too nosy with mandatory appointments, you just ghost them and work under the table in construction or hospitality.
Yes. So think about what this does to the math. If you correct the calculations, if you account for the fact that half of your lost control group is actually secretly employed,
Oh, wow.
the grand 5.6% employment effect of the training programs gets sliced in half. It plummets to a mere 2.3%.
A 2.3% boost? For billions of dollars, they built a mountain to give birth to a mouse.
But it actually gets worse, because this raises an incredibly important question about academic rigor. Sianesi didn't just stop there. She asked, what if we run the harshest, most unforgiving statistical test possible?
The worst-case boundary analysis.
Yes, in statistics, you run bounds analysis. You test the absolute worst-case scenario to find the absolute floor of your data, Sianesi asked. What if all the people who vanished had actually found real jobs on their own without any government help, but the government just lost their paperwork?
Okay, so run the absolute worst-case scenario on this multi-billion-dollar globally worshipped project. What happens to the success rate?
The total net benefit becomes a negative number.
Wait, no way. I need you to say that again. You're telling me that in the strictest statistical view, spending all this money, building all these classrooms, paying all these instructors, taxing the population to fund it, it actually made things worse than doing absolutely nothing.
Yes. Under the worst-case boundary analysis, the real employment effect of the active labor market programs was negative 1.6%.
That is a total slap in the face to every policymaker who championed this. A negative return on investment.
The policy was wildly, recklessly overrated. Why? Because it completely ignored the people who were quietly beating the system on their own. It ignored the people who found jobs in the shadows while the government was too busy patting itself on the back for filling up classrooms.
The arrogance of it, honestly. To assume that if the government isn't helping you, you must be completely helpless.
That is what the data forces us to confront.
Okay, let's pivot. Because I don't want to paint this as entirely black and white. Not every single person who took a class was a parasite. Some people actually used the programs correctly, right? Some people genuinely learned skills and improved their lives. And this brings us to the most nuanced part of the data: timing, privilege, and systemoparasites.
Timing is destiny here. In this system, the exact month you decide to join a training program dictates the entire trajectory of the rest of your life.
This blew my mind when I read the source material. The timing effects make absolutely zero intuitive sense. Run to a training program on day one of losing your job, and you ruin your future. Wait 6 months, and you win. That makes no sense to me. If I lose my job, shouldn't I immediately start retraining to make myself more marketable?
You would think so. The proactive person says, I was fired on Friday, I start a coding boot camp on Monday. But the data says no. Joining a program immediately in month 1 yields a pathetic 2.5% bump in employment over 5 years.
Why? Why is ambition punished like that?
Because it isn't ambition, it's panic. When you jump into a government class in month 1, you are rushing. You take the first class available, not the class that actually fits your long-term career goals. More importantly, you trigger the lock-in effect right when your resume is freshest.
Oh, you lock yourself in a classroom right when your industry contacts still remember you. Right when you should be out having coffee, going to interviews, leveraging your recent experience.
Exactly. You blind yourself to immediate job offers because you are stuck in a mandatory seminar from 9 to 5.
So when is the sweet spot? When should you actually pull the trigger?
Joining between months 3 and 6. That is the Goldilocks zone. That yields a 5.7% long-term employment bump.
Okay, logically that tracks. You lose your job, you spend 3 months hustling, you exhaust your immediate network, you send out 100 resumes. If nothing bites by month 4, you realize the market has shifted. Your skills might actually be outdated. Then, before you get too rusty, you pivot to training.
It is a calculated, highly rational move. You give the market a chance, and when it rejects you, you upgrade your hardware. But then we hit the cliff. The absolute disaster zone.
The curse of the 15th month.
This is where the data gets dark again. For 14 months, a huge chunk of the unemployed population completely ignores the training programs. They don't take a single class. They reject every offer from the employment office. They just sit at home and collect checks.
And then?
On the 15th month, they violently kick down the doors to get in.
A massive stampede.
Participation spikes by a massive 11% in a single month. Why?
Well, because we established the rules of the game earlier. The 60 weeks of 80% paid welfare runs out right at month 15.
Precisely. They aren't kicking down the door to learn how to code. They aren't there to learn how to weld. They are there to buy a lifeline.
They're just buying 60 more weeks.
Yes. And this brings us to the most enraging, uncomfortable part of the data, the stark divide between privilege and marginalization.
This is the ultimate proof of how systems warp human behavior. Sianesi compares 2 distinct groups of people who join a training program in that fateful 15th month. Group A is what we will call the marginalized. They have 0 welfare benefits. Maybe they were self-employed, or maybe they didn't work enough hours at their last job to qualify for the generous unemployment insurance.
Right, they have nothing.
And Group B is the privileged. They have the golden ticket. They are riding the full 80% paid welfare train.
The contrast between how these 2 groups perform after taking the exact same class is breathtaking. Let's look at the marginalized workers, the ones with 0 benefits. When they take a class in month 15, they see a massive 13.1% explosion in their long-term employment.
13.1%. I mean, that is a massive success story. That is the program working exactly as intended.
It works because they are hungry, they have no safety net, they have been surviving with 0 government income for over a year. When they finally get into a classroom, they devour the material. They take the class, they learn the skill, and the second they graduate, they fight like hell to get hired. The training works miracles when the underlying motivation is pure survival.
But what about the privileged workers? The ones who had been collecting 80% of their salary for 14 months and only jumped into the class to reset their clock. How did the exact same training program work for them?
For the privileged workers, the training effect on their employment was 1.3%.
1.3.
Which, in statistical terms, is completely invisible. It is statistically 0.
They got absolutely nothing out of the class.
Nothing. Because welfare had become an opiate, it completely numbed their drive to work.
You can just picture it, right? The marginalized worker is sitting in the front row, taking furious notes, asking the instructor questions, treating it like a matter of life and death. And the privileged worker is sitting in the back row, scrolling on their phone, half asleep, just waiting for the clock to run out so their benefits will renew. They aren't absorbing a single piece of information.
It is what economists call systemic parasitism. A subset of citizens figured out the ultimate survival strategy, a perfect, infinite loop of fake training and real cash.
The compensatory cycle.
Yeah.
Explain the grim mechanics of this parasite loop. How did they pull it off?
It operated like a flawless machine. Step 1, collect your generous welfare benefits for 14 straight months. Step 2, right before they expire, at the very last second, agree to take a 5-month government training class. Step 3, the moment the class ends, legally reactivate your benefits and immediately quit looking for work. Step 4, collect for 14 more months. Repeat until you hit retirement age.
They created a permanent, invisible underclass that literally never had to touch the real economy.
And it was a trap. Hit the month 15 mark, and the system swallows you whole. You never escape.
The parasitic spiral. Sianesi tracked this, right? She looked at where these people were years later.
Yes. People who joined a training program at the 15th month were 6 to 8% more likely to be trapped in this permanent parasitic loop 4 entire years later.
4 years later, they are still just looping. Class welfare, class welfare. They are basically ghosts in the machine.
While those who joined early, in month 3 or 4, the proactive ones we talked about earlier, they avoided this fate almost entirely. Their rate of falling into the loop was only 1%.
So time breeds disease. The longer you sit in the system, the more the system infects you. The longer you collect the check, the harder it is to ever imagine working for one again.
But there is a dawn of hope in the data. And it brings us back to month 6.
Right. Why are the month 6 people the only ones immune to the welfare virus?
If you join a program at month 6, your long-term welfare collection actually drops by 7.4%. You don't fall into the loop. Why?
Because at month 6, desperation hasn't rotted into complacency yet.
That is exactly it. Desperation hasn't rotted. You have been unemployed for half a year. You are worried. The sting of losing your job is still fresh, but your skills haven't totally degraded yet. Your professional identity is still intact. You aren't deeply psychologically dependent on the government yet. You still view yourself as a worker who happens to be unemployed, not an unemployed person who occasionally pretends to work.
So you take the training, and you use it as a weapon to conquer the job market, not as a shield to hide from it.
Yes, you use it offensively, not defensively.
It's kind of like physical therapy. If you blow out your knee and you start physical therapy right after the injury, you get your strength back. You fight through the pain, you do the exercises, and you walk again. But what happens if you wait too long? What happens if you sit on the couch for 15 months? The muscle completely atrophies, the joint freezes. By month 15, you don't want physical therapy. It hurts too much. You just want painkillers.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The active labor market program was designed to be physical therapy for the economy. But the loophole, the automatic 60-week reset, turned the classroom into a dispenser for painkillers.
Okay, let's bring it all home. We have looked at the 1994 crash. We looked at the billion-dollar black hole. We uncovered the infinite money glitch, the ghost workers, and this parasitic spiral. What is the ultimate takeaway here when medicine becomes poison?
The modern welfare state was built with the absolute best of intentions. It was built to eradicate poverty, to catch people when they fall, so a temporary stroke of bad luck doesn't ruin a family.
But when you tie education directly to welfare renewal, you don't eradicate poverty.
Yeah.
You eradicate the human drive to work.
The Swedish experiment proves a brutal truth. If you take away anything from this deep dive, let it be this. Labor training must be completely decoupled from welfare extension.
You cannot mix the two. They have to be entirely separate systems.
Never mix them. If a classroom becomes a stepping stone to a prolonged paycheck, human inertia will completely overwrite any actual learning. People will not learn. They will endure. They will endure the lecture simply to reach the payout at the end of the semester.
It is a massive global implication. I mean, are other nations blindly walking into this exact same trap today? We built a safety net, but we forgot to ensure people could actually climb out of it. We just made the net really, really comfortable.
And a comfortable net eventually becomes a cage.
So here is a chilling philosophical question to leave you with. We just spent the last hour dissecting how a system's rules dictated human choices. We judged the ghost workers who vanished into the black market. We judged the people caught in the parasitic loop in month 15.
But consider this. If a system is designed so poorly, so naively that it practically begs you to exploit it, is the parasitic loop actually a failure of human morality? Or is it just a flawless execution of human rationality?
Think about it. Be deeply honest with yourself. If a massive, faceless government offered you an infinite loop of 80% pay, and all you had to do was sit quietly in the back of a classroom for a few months every year, would you have the willpower to walk away? Would you choose to take a hard, exhausting, stressful job? Or would you take the painkiller?
Look at your own local policies. Look at the safety nets and incentive structures around you. Examine them through this new, unforgiving lens.
Keep digging. Keep questioning the perfect systems around you. Because as we saw today with Sianesi's data, sometimes the official X-ray machine is broken, and the muddy waters of human motivation run incredibly deep.
We'll see you next time.